Hey everyone, welcome back to our At the Whiteboard series. Tonight the goal is to answer the question, how do I get stronger? This is a question that I've been asked probably 1,000 times, if not thousands of times, over the course of the past even just 4 or 5 years that we've been open, over the course of my lifetime as a trainer, even more so. Within the context of what we do on a daily basis here in CrossFit, it has a very specific context, so that's what we're going to try to. That's how we're going to try to address that question, specific to the people that are training here. If your circumstances fall outside of that, obviously the answers to those questions might be slightly different. But our goal here is to at least give you some sort of real kind of substance with respect to. You're an athlete that's been doing CrossFit for a certain period of time. How do I answer that question if it's something that I know I'm struggling with and I know I want to get stronger? I want to be able to handle heavier weights in various movements, in all the movements that we do, whether it's barbell movements or even just bodyweight movements. What are some of the answers that's going to get me there? And so hopefully we're going to provide some of that stuff within this discussion. It's a very loaded question, so it could take a very, very long period of time to really provide specific answers to that question based upon your background, your training experience, so on and so forth. So it's a bit of a general discussion, a bit condensed, and obviously we're going to sort of trim the fat a little bit and see if we can just at least give you guys a starting point. First and foremost, with respect to how to answer that question and how do we go about getting stronger, first we have to at least categorize people into one of two categories. There potentially are more than two categories. There certainly are more than two categories that we could put people into, but for our purposes, just to simplify things, you're going to fall either under a category of a beginner, which would mean that you've been training or weight training, real serious weight training, for less than 2 years, and that's a bit of an arbitrary number based upon what type of weight training you're doing. But let's just say you've been training here with us for less than 2 years. You would still be categorized as a beginner, relatively speaking. If you've been weight training or performing our workouts for two or more years, you would be considered an intermediate or advanced athlete with respect to weight training. And so that's an important distinction to make, simply because the answer to the question of how do I get stronger is fundamentally very, very different based upon which category you fall within. Now, this number of 2 years, again, it's a bit of an arbitrary number. There is certainly people that have been doing this for less than 2 years that might fall into this category. There might be people that have been doing this for 4 or 5 years and would still be considered beginners just based on the adaptation that they've gone under and their training experience and their background, their athletic background, so on and so forth. But again, simplification purposes, this is kind of how we're going to discuss it. If you're still a beginner, it's very simple. You're just going to continue to perform basic movements, similar to the movements that we do within our workouts. Not similar, exactly what we do in our workouts. So the barbell movements, such as back squats and front squats and deadlifts and power cleans and power snatches and overhead pressing and bench pressing. Some of the bodyweight movements that we utilize for strength purposes, such as pull-ups and variations of pull-ups, handstand push-ups and other variations of pushing, dips and push-ups, so on and so forth. And you're going to perform those on a regular basis, and you're basically just going to follow a linear progression. So, hey, we back squatted a couple weeks ago and I used this much weight. This time around, I'm going to try to go a little bit heavier. Last time we did strict pull-ups, I did X number of repetitions. This time I'm going to try to do X number of repetitions plus 1 or 2 additional reps. And so we're just kind of like, just kind of forcing adaptation onto the system by just gradually adding more stress to the system. It's very simple, very straightforward. It doesn't need to be overly complicated. It's kind of a nice position to be in when you can get stronger that much, or that simply, basically. Those are kind of the golden ages of strength training. The intermediate advanced athletes, those of you that have already gone through this process and you understand that process and you remember the days where it was like every time I touched a bar, I was just able to add more weight to it magically, and you just get stronger really without that much very specific effort other than just being consistent and performing the movements obviously with good mechanics and pushing yourself to put more weight on the bar. And now you've kind of reached a point where things are probably going to stagnate and plateau, and you're simply not going to continue to just add weight to the bar every single time that you back squat or front squat or overhead press, for example. And so with our intermediate or advanced athletes, the situation changes quite a bit, where now things have to get a little bit more complex. So we can no longer just keep it simple stupid up here, but rather we have to start to not overcomplicate things, but add a layer of complexity to our programming. Within our CrossFit format, within our group class format, that's a bit of a challenge. We try to incorporate as much variance as possible in terms of the movements, in terms of the rep schemes, in terms of the tempos, in terms of the rest periods, in terms of the format, so on and so forth. So that does cover the bases here, but there are definitely going to be some areas that perhaps that you need to be exposed to more frequently that we're simply not able to do within that group setting. So the intermediate advanced athlete requires more varied movements. So perhaps not just our basic barbell and bodyweight movements, but movements that incorporate dumbbells, unilateral movements where you're just working one leg at a time, one arm at a time, other variations of movements that we perhaps would never program, so on and so forth. You need more variance in terms of loading, in terms of the repetitions that you perform, the tempos, as well as the rest periods. So the more variety, really, to a certain extent, the better. Very specifically, you need to target weaknesses. So you need to first and foremost be able to identify what those weaknesses are that are preventing you from getting stronger. And then you also need to have very specific programming that allows you to expose yourself to those weaknesses more and more frequently relative to things that you're already potentially pretty good at. And I'll talk about some specific examples as we go through this discussion. So in terms of kind of expanding that topic of targeting weaknesses, we're going to talk about that within the context of two different things, really. One is just understanding that certain lifts that we perform should have a certain ratio relative to other lifts that we perform. So let me explain what that means. So when we talk about this concept of structural balance, which is a concept that was not coined by me, this is a concept that I learned from one of my teachers, Charles Poliquin, and the idea, and this is a concept that he learned from his teachers, so on and so forth. This is not a novel or new thing. This is something that's been around for decades. But first and foremost, when you're looking for structural balance or balance within the structure, we're looking at certain ratios of lower body and upper body lifts. So if we look at our lower body lifts, what we use as kind of the gold standard is our back squat, and we want to see a certain ratio that exists between how much weight we can back squat and how much weight we can front squat. And that'll indicate a certain balance between really our anterior muscles and our posterior muscles, just generally speaking. We also want to see a certain ratio that exists between our back squat number and our deadlift. We also want to see a certain ratio between our back squat and our power clean. And there's a couple other examples. That's just so you guys have at least some context here. I won't give you the specific numbers, but I do have them in case you're interested. And then with the upper body, we're going to utilize the bench press, or kind of like a close grip bench press, as our gold standard, as the number that we're going to compare everything against. And then we would also utilize other upper body lifts to determine whether or not we're balanced with respect to our upper body structure. One of those would be the strict press overhead. Another would be a weighted chin-up. And then again, there's other examples of other movements that we would use as a means of comparison. And basically what this tells us is whether or not we're balanced between the front and back of our bodies, more or less. There's a whole lot of potential nuances within that would create an imbalance between those numbers, but more or less that's one of the things that it's going to tell us. Now beyond that, and perhaps as we dig a little bit further into the structure or the body, and we start to understand what potentially is preventing us from getting stronger, what potentially is preventing us from pushing beyond a certain plateau, what's preventing perhaps these ratios to be off, is an imbalance between our left and right sides of our body. So for example, my left leg is stronger than my right leg. or the front and back of my body. So in other words, perhaps just to very generally speaking, my pushing muscles are stronger than my pulling muscles. And that's something that is very difficult to just be able to pinpoint without a pretty thorough physical movement analysis and assessment and testing. That's something that we can do here. It's something that I can do for you. But pretty much rest assured that almost every single person in this gym has an imbalance between their left and right sides, probably both in the upper body and lower body. And they probably have an imbalance between the front and the back, or the pushing and pulling muscles, or let's call it like their quadriceps and their hamstrings and glutes, or their posterior lower body muscles. And it's pretty much a guarantee that we all have that stuff that exists. Whether or not we actually identify specifically what those are is probably even less important than just putting ourselves through the process of making sure that we train those things independent of one another to try to bring them back into balance. And that's really the in terms of giving you guys something, an answer to the question, when you're in this situation, how it is that I get stronger. It's not just like, I just got to keep putting more weight on the bar and just try to force it, because that's going to be a dead end. It's understanding that this is potentially or most likely what is holding you back at this point in time in your training career. And the way to bust through that plateau and continue to get stronger is, without overcomplicating things, creating or following a program that helps you eliminate those weaknesses and eliminate those imbalances. And so that's our structural balance program is designed to do that. It's designed to train the left side and the right side independent of one another. It's designed to target specific weak areas of the body that we otherwise perhaps might not train. And it allows us also to identify and eliminate weaknesses or imbalances between front and back. And so the program that we start people out on, and you've probably already seen some people following this program kind of as guinea pigs to see how it would fit within a week of training here, incorporating CrossFit on top of it, which isn't the easiest thing to do necessarily. But basically there's a lower body program, there's an upper body program, so they're two separate workouts. They're designed to be performed at least once a week each. That's assuming that you're also doing CrossFit workouts on top of that. The lower body program specifically is designed to strengthen the muscles that stabilize the knee, very specifically this quadricep muscle right here, your vastus medialis, which is otherwise very difficult to target and isolate. So very specific movements that do that. It targets your lower back muscles, which obviously we do train with all of our movements that we perform, but we kind of, again, isolate and really try to strengthen it independent of other movements. And then our glutes and hamstrings. So really, in terms of creating anterior and posterior balance, typically most of us are anterior dominant. So we're quad dominant athletes, and we know how to use these guys, and we're stronger here and weaker back here. And so this program very specifically activates and strengthens those muscles. And there are specific exercises that are designed to do all those things, and that's what the program entails. The upper body program is designed very specifically to help stabilize the shoulder joint, so strengthen the stabilizers of the shoulder, improve postural strength, so the muscles of the upper back and the midsection that will help us maintain our posture, both statically when we're just sitting and standing around, but also when we're performing dynamic movements. And then creating balance between pushing and pulling upper body muscles. A lot of us are stronger in either the push or the pull. Certain athletes are super strong when they pull, but they can't push for the life of them. And also vice versa. You probably know which one of those boats you fall within. And the goal is, of course, to create balance between those two. So that's what that program allows us to do. It's designed mainly around unilateral movements, so dumbbell movements, single arm movements, single leg movements, things that we would never really program on a regular basis in our regular workouts. So we're missing that within our program. And then the types of movements that you're performing initially are going to be very slow, eccentric movements, meaning that you're lowering yourself or lowering the weight down very slowly and under control. Along with a fairly aggressive upward portion of the movement. So on the overhead press, for example, you would push straight up. nice and aggressive, and you would lower the weight super slow, under control, all the way back to the beginning, and then go again. So what that elicits is a certain response in the body and the muscle with a very high time under tension. So the stabilizer muscles kick in and activate, and it helps us develop good stamina in those muscles, good endurance in those muscles. That's going to carry through as the program progresses. And it's really built around a 4-week program. There are several of them that I have created, that I've practiced and utilized throughout years and years of training. They're fairly straightforward. They do require a bit of instruction and help in the beginning and assistance. These are workouts that if you're interested in performing them and want to take advantage of this, all you really have to do is reach out to me. I'll send you everything you would need to at least get started with the beginner entry-level program. And then from there, once you complete 4 weeks of that, there are other programs that'll then progress into. So yeah, if this is something that you are interested in, if this kind of conversation is resonating with you, I know that I've had several conversations with people, even over the past couple weeks, as they've seen other people performing these workouts, like, hey, I want a little bit on how do I get involved in that? Just probably intuitively knowing that it's something that you need, perhaps, or maybe just you just need a slight change of pace from what we do in our group classes. All you really have to do is reach out to me. You can email me, you can chat with me at the gym. I can send everything that you would need in terms of understanding what the movements are. There are video demonstrations of all the movements that I have access to that I can give you. And then you can just coordinate with me in terms of receiving any additional instruction you might need, or get any questions answered that you might have with respect to how to do things properly, how much weight should I be using, so on and so forth. There's a whole bunch of little details that'll make more sense when you see the program. So I would encourage as many of you guys, maybe not all of you, that might be a bit overwhelming, but any of you that are interested, for sure, please reach out to me. It does require a bit of initiative and motivation on your own part to do these workouts on your own outside of class. They're not easy workouts, and ask anybody that's been doing them. They're incredibly challenging in ways that perhaps in different ways than CrossFit workouts are difficult, and perhaps even more demanding in certain respects. So yeah, if you're highly motivated and really want to kind of break through the plateau that you've been stuck at perhaps for a while, I would say that this would be a great place to start. Like I said, email me if you have questions, or if you would like me to send you everything that you would need, and then we can kind of continue the conversation from there. I think that's all I have for you guys. Hopefully that addresses this idea. There are obviously, again, hours and hours worth of conversation around this topic, so if you have more specific questions about your own situation in terms of getting stronger, just generally speaking, or with respect to specific movements, just reach out to me, and I'm happy to chat about this stuff all day long. That's it, guys. Thank you for listening, and hopefully I'll see you all at the gym. Thank you.